All right, so what is one of the first memories that you have?
Probably I was in like the third grade, I think. And at recess, we'd go out and swing, and it was a great big swing, had several, or frame, and had several swings on it, and we would get on them and pump and standing up, going or sitting faster and faster, and flip over the frame. I remember my sister Jeannie, when she was, of course, 2 years behind me, I think. And we all knew we used to go right home as soon as, of course, we walked to school. We lived in Winchester. And we used to go home right after school was out. And we did, except Jeannie, for some reason, decided to go with the little girlfriend to her house. And she didn't come home, so Mom called the police. And of course she had that one friend, others, but that one friend was her main friend. So thought, well, I bet that's where she is. So she went, or told the police, and they went and picked her up and put her in the back seat and brought her to the house, and she was crying and scared. And of course she got a whipping. When I was maybe 3 years old, yeah, probably 3, and I had, my dad seen me put a button in my mouth, and he reached over and grabbed a hold of my arm to get the button. I swallowed the button and he broke my arm.
He was just trying to keep you from choking.
Yeah. And there again, Jeannie swallowed gasoline out of, and Mom had to walk her to the doctors. But she didn't swallow a lot because of course it tasted terrible, but she was really little. She was crawling around, and it was evidently sitting there, and so, and her, one time, I can't remember how it caught on fire, but her hair did catch on fire one time.
Aunt Jeannie's hair?
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
And it didn't, Mom or Dad, I don't remember, was right there, and of course, and got it out. It didn't do a lot of damage or anything, but she did have some burns. When I was in the third grade, we were all, not the whole class at one time, but they'd have so many go up and stand in line and be in a spelling bee. And so I was in the one line, and when the teacher came to me, she wanted me to spell shirt. And I just didn't hesitate a minute. I could remember. I said S-H-I-T, and the kids all laughed. But I didn't realize what I had really said, and that I'd left the R out. So, but she was upset with me and made me go sit down. And I was held back in school, I think, after the third grade. I think I had to take third grade over, third or fourth grade.
Didn't know that.
Yeah.
So at that time, do you know what your dad was doing?
Not at that time. I really don't remember. He was more than likely was a meat cutter in a grocery store, because that's what his trade was. He had his own tools, and if he did go from one meat place to another, he had his own stuff that he took with him. He was known as a very excellent meat cutter. I think in the third or fourth grade, no, it had to be fourth or fifth grade, at Rural Center, Indiana. And we walked, of course, to school, and as I would pass this one house every morning and evening, I, of course, would notice this one house had beautiful tulips all over in the front of the yard. And my mom loved tulips. And so going home one evening after school, one afternoon, I stopped and picked, I don't remember how many, but a bouquet of tulips for Mom. And I went home. We lived in a house trailer in Rural Center, and gave them to Mom. And of course she was thrilled until a knock came at the door, and the lady, my mom answered. She said, "I want to see one of your girls." And she pointed at me. And she said, "She stole some of my tulips out of my front yard." And Mom said, "Well, she had them, yes." And she said, "If you would have asked me," I said I wanted them for my mom. Mom, she loves tulips. And the lady said, "If you had come to the door and asked me for some for your mom, I would have given them to you, but you shouldn't steal." And of course I got scolded, but I don't remember that I got a spanking for it. But anyway, Mom got to keep the tulips. And the only other time I stole anything in my life was, I was probably 10, and it was in Winchester, Indiana. And we had a neighbor girl that was older. I can't think of her name now. And she asked Mom if she could take me to go to the dime store, what we called it back then. And Mom said, "Yeah, just, hold her hand when you're crossing the streets and so forth." And she said, "And don't stay long." And so we go to the dime store, and she tells me, she says, "Go over here." Well, she took me and showed me where the cosmetics were. And of course I didn't think of them as cosmetics back then, and she said, "I'm going to go over here." And she said, "You pick these out, the different ones out," and showed me. And she said, "Then come up front and I'll take care of it." Well, she didn't. She just had me give them to her, and she put them in her pocket and said, "Come on, we're ready to go." So I did. And we hadn't been home very long until somebody from the dime store came, and they said, "That little girl stole lipstick," and so forth. And of course Mom didn't believe it at first, and "Where is it?" And I said, "Well, I gave it. She wanted it, and that's why I got it. I thought she paid for it." And she hadn't, and I had to go get it and take it back to the store And it was so embarrassing. And of course, Mom took me, and so I never stole another thing after that. It was terrible to even pick a grape at the one grape off of a thing at the grocery store. And my sister Marty, when we lived there, there was a creek behind us, and we'd go wading in it. And of course, she was a tomboy, and she liked to go fishing. And of course, we'd get in the creek, and we'd have leeches on her legs and ankles, and pull them off. And anyway, she was going to catch a fish with her hands one time, but it was by then winter time, and she did. She caught the fish, but it took her quite a while to get it, and she carried it home to give to Mom, and her hands were froze, had frostbite, and we thought, and she was crying, they hurt so bad, and we thought, well, when we get home, Mom will put them in warm water and stuff. And she didn't. She got cold water and snow and put them in that, and that seems strange, when they were so cold, she put them back in snow and cold water. But it took the sting out, I guess. I don't. And my dad was working for the railroad, and we lived at Wall Center, and of course it was during World War II, and everything was rationed, and we were very poor. And some people in Wall Center had, for some reason, a boxcar sitting in their backyard. And so none of us, the last time we were together and talked about it, none of us girls could remember what we did for bathroom and showers and food. It was just an empty boxcar. And we're assuming that
And that's where you lived, was in that.
yeah, we lived in the boxcar. And I don't remember how long, and but we think that the people that owned the boxcar helped us out, and they would let us. I know they let us come in and use the bathroom, but I don't remember how long we lived in the boxcar. But it wasn't just overnight or something. It was our home. We didn't have, much of anything.
Would that have been in the winter or the summer? Do you remember?
Nope. No. No. Now, Mom, if she was still here, she could give you all the details, of course. But it's just too many years ago, and I really think things were so hard, and I think you just kind of shut them out of your mind. But I can remember Mom fixing a sack lunch for us to walk down the road a ways to the railroad, part of the railroad track where Dad was working, and he'd have his lunch, and we could be with him for a little while and walk back home. And he was helping to lay track, and it was hard work. But as far as the Depression, I remember that coffee was rationed, gas. I remember Dad pulling into the filling station, and I don't remember how much each person could get, but it wasn't a full tank by any means. Of course, we didn't have money anyway for a full tank. And I remember back then chewing gum, if we ever got any. The paper that was around it had, each stick had like aluminum foil around. There was another wrapper and then the foil, and it was stuck together, and we would work to pull that off without tearing it too much, and save that and turn it in. We had what was supposed to be oleo, or it looked like just a pound of lard. It was white. It was just like a pound of lard. And you got a cellophane package, and with it, about like that, and in the center was a round button type yellow thing. And what you did was open that, and you mixed that in with the lard, and it made it yellow, and that was your butter, or oleo. I don't remember if it was before or after Dad worked on the railroad, but he worked at an elevator, and he would bring home the empty feed sacks, and a lot of them were pretty. They were flowered and stuff, and Mom could sew like crazy. She could look at something in the store, and she could go home and make it. And she made us all of our clothing out of, as girls, out of the feed sacks. And of course, at times you were made fun of because the others had store-bought clothes and so forth, but we were proud of them. We thought they were very pretty. And that's one thing that we all remember when we've talked about it, is that we never felt poor. We were very poor, and sometimes had nothing to eat, and but we never felt poor. And I can remember Mom telling that one time Aunt Florence came over to visit us, and she said that we kept coming to Mom and saying Daddy was at work, and each one of us would quietly say to Mom, I'm hungry, I'm hungry. And Mom said, well, when we're done visiting, we'll have some. I'll fix you some. And Aunt Florence, quietly, she said, and Aunt Florence has told me this too, that she went to the refrigerator when Mom didn't know it, nobody was around, and she said the refrigerator was empty. And so what we would be sent to bed with would be each 1 tablespoon of rice, cooked rice. And that was all we had at times, a lot of times. And we never lived, I can't think of a house here, but as you were growing up, I would think, when you came along.
When Amanda came along?
Yeah. Did you have a friend that didn't live in a really nice home or anything? No? Anyway, I would say we wouldn't let, maybe it was you, I don't remember. Didn't want you to be there with them in that house even, you know, 'cause it was so run down and everything. And then all of a sudden you'd think, that's what I grew up in. I grew up in a boxcar. I grew up in, you know, I was in a ice house in Arizona we lived in. This old, big old brick basement area. And that's where they had originally kept the bags or squares of ice. And so we lived in, you know, some really bad places.
Alright, so then where did you live after the boxcar?
We moved to Winchester, Indiana, where we were back and forth a lot between Winchester and Logansport out in the country and Rural Center. And so we moved back to Winchester, and I was probably 10, 12 years old. And things were still rough, financially, of course. And so Mom and Dad decided to move to Arizona. So they packed everything up, and which we didn't have much, and took off in our old car. I wish I could remember the car. I mean, I can see it, but I don't know whether it was a Model T or what it was. But anyway, we were jammed in, us 4 kids, and of course Nancy had already been adopted. I didn't get her in the right place, but anyway, so we were all in the back seat, us 4 girls, and when we got out there, Dad didn't have any trouble finding a job because of his meat cutting skills, and he worked in a store. He did that for a long time. I don't remember how many years. And then for some reason, I don't remember why, they decided to move back to Winchester. So, like I've said, we moved a lot. And so we moved back to Winchester, and I don't know how much time took place in between. But one thing I forgot to mention was when we lived in Arizona, we lived in Glendale,
Glendale,
yes,
Arizona.
Arizona.
At that farm?
Huh?
At that farm?
Yeah, at a dairy farm. And Dad worked milking the cows, and of course by then they had the things that you suctioned onto the cow's tits, you know. So anyway, that's where we lived, and
Which that was in the middle of the desert then?
yeah,
So it was just the farm by itself?
yeah, just that dairy farm out there, and it was right out in the desert. And one day we were outside of the house. It wasn't much of a house, but they furnished it for the workers, and heard this awful noise. Just thought, what in the world is that? The ground shook, and here come a big herd of wild horses. And they ran right through around the house and on, you know. I don't know why of course, like I say, it was out in the desert, so. And this house we lived in, well, we moved into another one on that same farm. And it had what they called back then, I don't know if they still have them, but for some cooling, they had this great big thing that was set on the roof of the house, and it was called a swamp cooler.
Mm-hmm. Yep, they saw them.
Mm-hmm. And we would, then I don't know what kind of a bug it was, but it wasn't a danger, you know, it wasn't a poisonous bug, but they would, some kind of beetle, it'd be that big, and we would catch those, and usually Marty would do it, and she would tie a string on the leg, and we would go out, you know, and run around, and that bug would fly around on that string trying to get it away. And
So you basically were walking a bug?
yeah. Yeah, and another thing that we enjoyed there, in the dairy building and everything, they had, and I couldn't begin to tell you a lot about it or what it was called, but the milk would come on loose, I mean just running milk, would come on this kind of a, I mean it was all had to be sterile and clean and everything, but there was one thing that would be up like this that it would get to, and the milk would run up over that to something over here, and when it went up that was a refrigeration cooling thing, and the pieces would freeze on there, and we weren't supposed to, but we would go in there and pick off the frozen milk and eat it. So, and then, like I say, we moved back to Winchester for some reason, and I can't remember a whole lot in between there, because when we were in Arizona, I had to be like 10 or 12 or somewhere around there. And Dad got on at Bunsel's Grocery in Winchester, and later on, Marty quit high school, and because she was in high school, and she quit high school, and she was in charge of the produce section. Daddy was in the meat department doing all of that, and she was in the produce section. So when, of course, this is out of order, I guess, but
Well, so if you move back to Winchester, when did you live in the house that
Burn.
was that before all of this then?
Well, it was before I graduated,
Okay.
and like I say, we lived out in the country, and all around us was a cornfield, and Daddy had a horse, and of course they belonged to the Circle X, which was rodeos and so forth, and square dancing, and but they
Was the house heated by a wood stove?
no,
No?
coal.
Coal.
And Dad had a horse. He had horses in Arizona and stuff, and it was in a fenced-in area behind the house, and there was no running water in the house. And so you had an outhouse that you used, and also we had to go to a pump, old-fashioned pump, and pump water to carry into the house for drinking, cooking, and everything. And so it was in February. We, of course, had gotten a few things for Christmas, and we had 2 bedrooms upstairs, and it was an old farmhouse, and we were renting it. And I always slept in the one room with Jeannie, and Barb and Marty slept in the other bedroom. And there was a light or a window right in front of where Jeannie and my bed was. And I woke up in the night, and February the 4th, and I woke Jeannie and I said, "Do you smell smoke?" No, of course she had been sound asleep. And then with the light, you could see the smoke. And at first we thought, oh, it's just light, how it'll come in. And it didn't take long. Right away we knew the house was on fire. And Daddy came to the bottom of the stairs and opened the door, and he said, it was an enclosed stairway, and he said, called us all, and he said, "Get down here, the house is on fire." And like I say, we had a coal stove, and for some reason, I suppose the flue was plugged or something, because it started in the flue. And my dad was not a big man, but we tried to get some of our furniture and stuff out, and he was trying to get the refrigerator out. I don't know why, but he was, and it got stuck in the doorway, and he couldn't get it any further, and of the kitchen. And we did get couch out and carried it out in way over from the house into the cornfield. And the flames and sparks from the fire flew over there and landed on the couch, and the couch sat there in the field and burned. We couldn't get the fire department to come. Our phone was not working, of course, and Mom and I got in their car and started going to the neighbors to use their phone. Of course, it was in the middle of the night, and so we'd pull in and honk the horn. Everybody, of course, was in bed asleep. Some wouldn't let us use their phone, and then when we did find somebody and we told them, want to call the fire department. We thought we would call the Winchester Fire Department. So Mom, that's what they did. They said, "Oh no," ask, where. You're in Union City District. And so then, and we were about halfway between the two. So then by the time they called the Union City Fire Department, they said, "No, you're not. You're in the Winchester Department." So nobody came, and so it burned. It burned to the ground, and the poor horse, of course, was in that fenced-in area, and he went crazy from the fire. He couldn't get away, and it was fairly close to the house. And but to try and put the fire out, we always slept in our slips. We never had pajamas and stuff, and we just slept in our slips, which were full slips at that time. And so we had to go out and use buckets, each one of us, and in our slips. And like I say, it was in February. It was very cold and snow on the ground, and we had to pump buckets full of water and carry it in to try to put out the fire. But of course it didn't do any good. So after that, Mom and Dad had been having some trouble, and they ended up getting a divorce soon after, or separating actually, not a divorce at that time. And we had all gone to Grandma Grantham's to live for the night, the rest of the night. And of course Uncle Junior and Uncle Howard lived there also. They didn't have much room and they were poor, but we were there for a short time. I remember the school, our classmates, the whole school took up collection for us to help us and gave us money. And they got money from, I'm assuming, like the Salvation Army or some help. But we all had, because Mom and Dad, of course, split up, Dad moved to Logansport, and Mom stayed with us, and we had to find a place to live. And I can't remember where we went first, but we ended up in Harrisville, Indiana, which was between Union City and Winchester. And Dad got on at the elevator there, and no, Dad had left. Barb's boyfriend worked at the elevator, and we had rented this little house. I don't know how we did, because Mom wasn't working yet, and we were all in school, except Marty had quit. And so we lived, Mom and us girls lived in this little house right in front of the fire, or the elevator. And across the street was a grocery store. And Mom worked there some, and they had a church there. And but growing up, we never went to church ever. And if we were Aunt Florence's, then we did, but otherwise we didn't. And so anyway, Barb had met Dick, her first husband. Like I say, he worked at the elevator. He was a really nice guy. He was crippled in one leg, and but he worked his fanny off. He was a good hard worker. And she became pregnant, and
Vicky. No? Oh.
Debbie.
Oh, yeah, Debbie. Yeah.
And so, of course, like I say, Dick was a hard worker, and so he found a place for him and Barb to live. And Marty decided to quit school too, and which she had, and she decided to go into the Army. So she joined the Army, and so she was gone away from the rest of us. So then it was just Mom and me and Jeannie. And I remember one time Daddy coming to see us, and he was never a violent man, but he had got to where he was really drinking. And he was going to beat up Mom. She was in the kitchen, and I heard them arguing, and I went in, and he was like this, ready to start hitting Mom. I picked up a kitchen chair and went for Dad. And I loved him dearly, but I wasn't going to let him beat up Mom. But as soon as he seen that, he stopped and he left. And they were separated. Dad lived in Logansport and we lived there. And somehow or other they decided to get back together, and so they were divorced for 2 years and then remarried, and they were still married when Daddy died at 55 years of age from cancer. And in between, during that 2 years, Mom had married a guy, and none of us liked him. And, well, she had been working in casket factory, and he worked there. And he moved her with him to Arizona. And we knew he was mean to her and beating her from letters. And one day, Barb and Dick got a phone call from Mom and said, could you, if I can get away and get the money, would you meet me at the bus station and pick me up? And they said yes. And I don't remember how long it took her, but she did get the bus and come back. And when they went there to pick her up, her face was all swollen and bruised, and he had really beat her, but she had gotten away. So then later on, when Daddy kind of straightened up, and he had been with several different women, and so they got back together, and like I say, lived together. Were never what I would say a happy marriage. The best times was when us kids were little. And it was hard. We were hungry a lot and so forth, but it was still better.
What happened after you stayed with your grandma the first night after the fire then?
Well, we all had to oh, I did too. That's when we went to live in Harrisville, wasn't it? Didn't I say that?
Maybe. So you went to live there, and then what happened?
When Mom and Dad got back together, then we, were split up. Barb, of course, got married and had Debbie. Marty had joined the Army, and so I was bound and determined that I was going to finish school. And that's when Jeannie went to Logansport, and she went to a different school than I went to for a while, and I don't remember how or why, but she went to Lincoln and I went to Wayne. And anyways, she wasn't going to stay there, and of course Mom and Dad took off. And I don't like remembering some of that and think, what people think, because they left us as teenagers to fend for ourselves. And so anyway, Jeannie, I do not know details as to how it came about, but she moved to Logansport and moved in with Nancy, with her mom and dad, adopted. And they had a boy, his name's John, and he is still alive today. And but Jeannie lived with them, I don't know, I think a couple years or something. I don't remember.
What grade was it that you were in, then you had to fend for yourself when they split up and you had to go and...
I had just finished my 8th grade and was going into
Wow.
my 9th.
That's pretty young.
Yeah. And that's when I went to live with the girlfriend. And
then you went to work for the old couple.
well, I was living with the old couple and of course did all the cooking and cleaning and helping take care of the old lady, and I was not happy, and he would come up the stairs and try to get in my room, and that really scared me. And so I let it be known at the church in Harrisville, where I'd started going, and just the neighborhood area, of course it was all out in the country, that I needed a place to live, and I'd work for my room and board.
Alright, so after you met John and got married, you had some things out of sequence, so give us what you can remember the best you can now.
Okay. We lived in Red Key, and he was not working a lot of the time, and Mom and Dad decided once again to move to Arizona. And so he decided that we would just follow them, which we did, and I was pregnant for Katrina, and so we got out to trying to think of the name. I've got pictures in Arizona where we went.
Douglas?
I guess it's Phoenix. It's like a suburb, of Phoenix. And we rented a house together, Mom, Dad, me, and John. And of course I was getting close to having time to have her. And so he wasn't really working very much and not trying to help, and Daddy, it was all on him, and of course he was a meat cutter again, and I don't remember where out there. And so anyway, I of course went into labor and had Katrina in the hospital at Maricopa County, Phoenix, Arizona. And we both had, it was a rough delivery for me, and she was very tiny, 5 pounds, 4 ounces, and we both just about didn't make it. And she was kept in what they call an incubator, and I had to stay longer in the hospital, and I had to leave her there when I did go home for a while, till she grew some. And so we went back and was still living with Mom and Dad. And I've got pictures that I am giving Katrina a bath in the kitchen sink. And she was chubby.
Once I grew, I liked food.
You just didn't grow much.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so we were out there, gosh, it wasn't even 2 years, I don't think. And then, and that's where I kind of don't remember for sure, but because I stayed with him for a while, and that's when we moved back to Winchester and lived out there again in a house trailer. And he started getting meaner and stuff, and so he went into the Air Force, and Mom and Dad and my plan was, because he really threatened us if I tried to leave him with you. And so our plan was, okay, he's joined the Air Force, he won't have leave, he can't come home, and so we're gonna move. And we're not gonna let him know where we're at all, which we didn't. And we moved to Peru, and that's when, the second time, and that's when we lived in a house trailer behind where Kroger's used to be.
Broadway Plaza.
Huh?
Behind the Broadway Plaza.
Yeah. And Katrina by then was, because he had to join up, for like 4 years in the Air Force. And one of the nights, and of course we didn't know he had found out where we were, and heard a knock at the door. This was in Peru, and it was dark and it was late, and I went to the door, and there was John, and he tried to force his way in. And as I've said, my dad was not a big man, but he threatening what he was going to do and everything, and Dad of course heard it and came out there, and he had 1 foot in the door, and my dad took him by the collar like this, and he told him off good with cuss words too. And he shoved him back outside, and he of course fell out there on the ground. And I guess that scared him, because I never had anything from him again. So then is when, of course, I was working at Penny's, and I've told you that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You met Grandpa Alwine?
Yep. Met Grandpa Alwine, and
Hmm?
you met Grandpa Alwine and started dating. You told about that. And then you didn't go beyond that as far as how he might have proposed to you or anything like that.
Oh. I don't know that he did. I mean, like you think about, it just kind of happened. We dated for a whole 6 months and decided we wanted to get married. And of course I was crazy about him, and he was good to me and everything, and so I told you about the curtains that he came to buy. He owned a house out on the Deedsville Road, and so Katrina and I moved out there with him after we got married, and then lived out there for, well, Tim was born in 1964, and he was almost 2 years old.
So you had Uncle Eric and Uncle Jim and Uncle Tim all living in Deedsville?
Yeah. Yeah, we, of course I had, by then Katrina was about 3 years old, not quite, when Jim and I got married. And we lived out there several years. We got married in 1958, July the 18th. And so then Jim worked in Kokomo. Well, we had a pony, can't remember the pony's name. It was
Lucky.
Huh?
Lucky.
Lucky. More or less Katrina's pony. And that doggone pony would get out every time we turned around.
And he wouldn't let me ride him either.
And Jim would have to go get him, and I don't know where he went, I don't remember, but anyway, he'd bring him back, and of course he built an area onto the garage for the pony. And at one time we had a neighbor put sheep in the field around, fenced in field around the house, and they kept it all like it was mowed. I think I started saying that Jim worked in Kokomo, and so he would leave of a morning, be gone all day, and we were always just out there, me and the kids, and I'd give him a list for groceries, and he'd pick them up on the way home. And but I loved it out there, and we of course got snowed in a lot out there. And one day in the summertime, the kids of course played outside a lot all the time, and Jim had built a white fence in around where the parking area was for the car, and separated from the sidewalk to the house and the grass, the front yard. And I don't remember how Katrina, was that car the one where you pushed a button to start it? Yeah.
Yep.
And
And
so
I remember asking you how you made it start. How did you make it stop?
I don't
I can remember.
that. And
So you didn't have a key?
And so she got in it one day, and Jimmy and the others were playing out there in the front yard, but there was a tree there to the one side, and she started that car, and of course then got away from her, and she went through the fence, and Jimmy was standing just a little ways from her, but thank God she got it stopped and didn't hit him.
Because he'd have been pinned between the car and the tree.
True.
But the thing is, I had backed it up the driveway and got it back towards the fence area to park it, but I didn't know how to stop it. And so that's why it went on through. And it was just by God's grace that it stopped, I think.
One time Katrina, and she probably remembers it better than I do, but she got off the school bus in Deedsville, I think at a girlfriend's. No?
Brenda Pugh was getting her hair cut.
Oh, yeah.
at the gal that we did down there in Deedsville.
Isabella Moulton.
Yeah. And I decided I wanted to just go along with her. And I still remember the bus driver saying, "Are you sure it's okay with your mom and dad if you get off with her?" "Oh yeah, they won't care." That's what I said. I still remember it.
And of course, when the bus came and no Katrina, then we were mad as well as scared. Where is she? And the bus driver told us. And I think your dad had to go get you, didn't he?
I don't know, but I know I got a spanking.
Yeah. And other than that, out there we just had a quite normal life, I guess. And the boys were all born while we lived there. And
Did you have them all in Peru then?
had all three of the boys at Peru Hospital.
At Duke's?
Dukes. And right at 2 years apart. 60 was Jimmy, and 62 was Eric, and 64 Tim. But they was, not quite 2 full years apart. And Jimmy, when he was about 2, we didn't have Tim yet. Did have Eric, and he became very sick with the flu. And I'd taken him to the doctor and taken him, and he was constantly throwing up and couldn't keep anything down. Diarrhea real bad. And he became dehydrated. And Dr. Rendell said we tried different things, and he was on medicine, of course, but he's going to have to go to the hospital. So he was put in the hospital and could not have a thing to eat and just a sip of water. And I stayed in there, and I got Joanne Hart from down in Deesville came and stayed with Katrina and Eric. And Dad went ahead and went to work, but we almost lost him. He was very close to not making it, and very thin and peaked. And while he was in the hospital, I think it was 2 or 3 days that he had IVs in his arms, both arms, and I can't remember where he had IVs in his legs or in his head area, but he was very, very sick, could not have anything to eat or nothing. And it just broke my heart. They would bring because he was in the children's area, and they would bring breakfast for the other kids. And of course he wasn't allowed anything, and I can remember him just crying. He was so hungry, and he would cry and beg for something to eat. And of course that broke my heart. And they finally put a screen, one of those type screens,
To block him from being able to see them?
Yeah, around his baby bed, so that he couldn't see the food, but of course he could still smell it. And when he got to go home from the hospital, I can remember now going in the house, and Eric was, like I say, right, getting close to 2 probably, and maybe not, but anyway, Jimmy had seen so little before we left, and Eric had to me, but when I took Jim into the house, he just seemed like he just lost so much weight and everything, and Eric seemed so much bigger, and he really wasn't, but in my eyesight and thinking, because Jim was so sick. And
Uncle Jim was sick or Uncle Tim was sick?
Uncle Jim.
Oh.
And from then on, for some reason, I don't know, nobody, the doctor never said, but anytime up to even when he was in school, if he was sick, he was always very, very sick, and sometimes just seemed like he was deathly sick. And always looked it too when he was sick. I mean, he's the one that has been more, I want to say fragile, I guess, but anyway, and to this day, I really think that's why I worry about him if I don't hear, because I think if he's sick, how bad is he? I'm afraid he'll be really bad, and he has been with the flu and stuff. The only other one as children that was in the hospital was Tim, and that was when he was older and a young teenager, and they were having, I think, a Halloween party out in the garage. And of course the friends, you know, they were old enough to drive then, and I don't remember exactly all the details, but he somehow got caught between the front bumpers of two cars. And he had to go to the hospital and have surgery on his leg. And then he's also the one that had to have a emergency appendectomy. And thankfully, none of the others have really been, you haven't had any, have you?
Eric got that great big piece of glass in his shoulder.
Yeah.
Well, anything else in Deedsville?
That was
in Deedsville.
Was it?
Well, no, that would have been Mexico.
Huh?
That was Mexico, wasn't it? When we lived in Mexico that Eric got the glass? I'm pretty sure it was. I remember once out there in Deedsville that front door wouldn't latch. And all you had to do is just push on it and you'd go on out. It never latched. And then the one night you and Dad had gone out on a date or something, and a babysitter was there with us, and my brothers and I were running through the house playing tag or something, or chasing each other, and I ran out to go outside and pushed on that door, glass door that never latched otherwise, but that time it was. I went right through the glass, and I got cut my arm really badly and very close to the main artery in your wrist, and several places else, and they had, of course, hurry up, call them, and then come home and get me to the doctor to get stitched up. But other than that, we didn't have any broken bones or anything else out there.
That was, to me, the best time of my life, was just being out there with my kids, and even though we were, I mean, no woman today probably would like it, because for a long time didn't have a car. Jim would leave of a morning and go to Kokomo, and we were just out there. But you played, and we were outdoors a lot and stuff, and I had to mow the yard and stuff too, but that was the best time of my life, as far as I'm concerned.
So then after Deedsville, where did you guys go? And do you know what year that was when you left Deedsville?
Tim was not quite 2 years old, and he was born in 64, and I think we must have been 65 or 66 that Mom and Dad had decided to move. No, they were already out there, I think. And so Jim's service out of the garage is what he was doing at that time. Wasn't bringing in the best, and he was wanting to do something different. And so anyway, we put the house up for sale and had an auction out in the driveway of everything, and rented a U-Haul trailer, and we followed Mom and Dad to Arizona. And of course they were living in Bullhead City, Arizona, and Jim found work in Needles, California. And that's where he really first got into the refrigeration, heating, and cooling business for a big store that was called Claypool's. And that's at times, of course, he'd have to go out in the desert and work on coolers, air coolers and stuff, swamp coolers and air conditioning. And if he had a scorpion, which happened at times, or something that come like that come up while he was working on it, he would use the Freon and spray it and freeze it. And he brought black widow spider and scorpion. It was about that long with its tail clear out, and something else.
Tarantula.
Huh?
Tarantula.
Yeah, and earwigs. We had those. If you laid on the floor, and they would, crawl up on you. Of course, I never did like crawling stuff. So anyway, while we were out there, I was having a lot of female problems and had to have a complete hysterectomy at the age of 30. And Jim's mom, he got her paid her way to come out there and take care of him and the kids while I was in the hospital, and I had a long recuperation time and was very, very sick. And she took care of us, and one of the things that happened there was that she fixed liver and onions and tried to tell the kids that you wouldn't eat it, and she told them it was steak. But it didn't work because, liver.
Did they try it and chew it a couple times and spit it out or something?
Yeah, she didn't like that, but
I can't even stand the smell of it anymore.
she also cooked turnips and told us that was potatoes. And the minute you took a bite, you knew it wasn't a potato, it was a turnip. And so they did a lot of stuff like that, which, that's the way she cooked. She was, and, she was already pretty old. And so anyway, that lasted, I think she stayed a month or 2 months, something like that. And in between, Of course, Jim liked doing what he was doing as far as his job, and Katrina was in school, and Jimmy was in first grade, or second. First, I think. And of course, they had never been around Indian children and Mexicans and so forth, and they were at school, and there was, I don't remember if it bothered you any, but I know it did Jimmy.
The only thing that bothered me at school was when they'd bring snakes to school.
Yeah. And of course, we originally started living in the desert, and then we ended up renting a house out there, and then we ended up buying a house in Needles, and that's when they were going to school there, and they took swimming. Her and Jim took swimming lessons, and they would have to dive down and, remember, get that colored disc or whatever.
Yeah.
But that's where they both learned to swim. She always done good, but Jim had a rough time. He was in the first grade.
He had a crappy teacher.
Yeah, and it was a really rough time for him. He got chicken pox, then they all ended up with chicken pox, and but he was a shy boy, and of course he didn't do well at school, and when we came back here, well, we lived out there just exactly right close to a year, and finally admitted to each other that we didn't like it well enough to live there forever. And so he quit his job and we moved back here. And we moved here to Mexico in greenhouse that's right across from the main cemetery. And we rented that. And what did he do for a living? Can't think.
I don't know. Maybe you worked just as a repairman for somebody for a while. I don't know.
I can't remember. But then soon he got a building in town and started his own business, and of course he had learned in Needles the refrigeration and cooling and all that, air conditioning, and so he was on 2nd Street in Peru and started a business there, a small business, and when it came time, of course we lived right here in Mexico, and when it came time for school to start, you were in what, at the old school, 4th grade or something?
I never went to the Mexico school.
Oh, didn't you?
That last year of school, when we moved back, is when I stayed with what I call my grandma and grandpa Enid, and finished out there at Macy.
Yeah.
The boys were here always in Mexico for the elementary, but I never did.
After we moved to Mexico, Indiana, we figured we'd go into the 2nd grade because they had finished school out there, and Ruth Lutz was the 1st grade teacher. And so I don't remember details as to how it happened and when it came about, but she really felt that it was best for him to take the 1st grade over. And he did. So he was like me, back 1 grade. And he still didn't do real good, but he started doing a lot better, and he got interested in Little League Baseball, and that helped him. And of course, all the boys played here in Mexico, Little League Baseball. And of course, then the new school, what do I want to say, consolidation happened, and I forget how many years they were still having school here at Mexico Building. Wasn't a long time.
No, it was quite a while, because I was in high school. I can remember the buses stopping out here at the school and let me off, and then I walked home to the Red House.
Yeah, of course, by then we had bought the Red House, and it was, when he first told me he wanted to go look at it and really was interested in it, and we lived in the one across from the cemetery. And when I first went with him to see it, I thought, oh my word, because it was
Terrible.
old house. It still had the light bulbs that hung down on a cord, and
Splintered wood floor.
Huh?
Had a splintered wood floor.
yeah, and all of it needed cleaned up and updated, and so we did that over the years, and of course he done it all himself, and was, got it to be a really nice house.
Well, and you'd worked on it just as hard. You did all the stripping of all the woodwork.
Yeah. And it had room at the front of the house that was our TV room, and then we had a long room that was dining room and a good front room. And so we carpeted all that and had somebody come and put pretty wallpaper on the walls, and I stripped the woodwork and stuff, and then he redone the put in the bathroom and off the kitchen, and don't remember how long we lived there, and the kids, of course, were all growing, and we never did take very many vacations, but we did a few. And so, and one year we went to Florida. We stayed with John and Flora Alwine. Then decided we put it to the kids. Do you want to go to Florida or put a swimming pool, in-ground pool here? So we all chose to do the swimming pool. And I think we went to Florida one time after Jim and Danae were married, I think. Danae went one time anyway.
Well, when did you put the pool in?
Oh, what year would have that been? You were
Was
all
that- I was already married.
Yeah, she was married, because that's where you remember being with Grandpa in the swimming pool.
No, it was in there, but when?
Well, you were just a little baby, really. And
Yeah.
so,
Did it just get put in then?
probably a year before, or in
So
that
probably
year.
in like 78? Were you pregnant?
I don't remember. No, I remember being at the pool with Jim and Danae and stuff and not being pregnant. but I just don't remember at all.
When we lived out there, Mom and Dad and Marty lived in Bullhead City, Arizona. And Marty was working in the same meat department as Dad. And we would go on the weekend. We'd take the kids, and I got pictures, and go up into the mountains. And we would spend a weekend up there, and we'd go at Christmas time, cut our tree down and bring it home. And we would cook on the open fire, and Grandpa Alwine and my dad did, and Mom would, and they fixed everything. They fixed biscuits, potatoes and eggs and stuff. It was a lot of fun. And so we would go up into the mountains and stay, and I think just usually a weekend would be about it. And Tim, I know, was still little because I've got pictures of him, and he was still in a diaper.
Put the pool in Mexico
Yeah.
in like 78 or so. 77, 78.
Has to be, yeah.
And then what after that?
Well, we lived there. Katrina, of course, your dad got married and had you, and you would be in the pool with Grandpa Alwine and had a lot of fun. And Josh, she was expecting Josh. We still lived in the red house. What year was he born?
82.
82? August of 82. October of 82 was when Grandpa Alwine decided that in between he had gone ahead and re-enlisted in the Army and was gone. And one of the main things I remember about him being gone before the divorce was Eric graduated from high school, and he wanted your dad, and he could have done it, but he did not catch a plane and come back for Eric's graduation from high school, which hurt him a lot. And so when it came time for Tim to graduate from high school, Eric called your dad, and he said, he just really told him off, and he said, you will be back here for Tim's graduation. And he actually did. And then it wasn't too long. Well, what year? I don't know what year Tim graduated. Maybe he'd already left. I don't remember. But he left in October, around the 12th of October in 82. And just kind of out of the blue. Of course, he'd been gone most of the time, active duty. And he said one morning or evening, he said he didn't, and we had started Climate Makers out where it is now, and bought the land off of a farmer, and I was working in the office, and I had planned my vacation, and which I had gotten airplane tickets to Tyler, Texas, to see Mom and Marty for 2 weeks. And so I can picture it just as clear, because we were upstairs on the landing. As you reached the top of the stairs, there was a landing and a door that went back to what was then Jimmy's bedroom, a big room. And then this one went into our bedroom, and then there was another one over there, and one over here, and the bathroom in between. And Tim's was in the front on this side of the house. And we were standing up there, and Jimmy came, and well, I have to back up a little. Jim had told me that he didn't, the day before, the evening before, that he was leaving, wanted a divorce, and he didn't love me anymore. And so then, the next morning, but I don't know why, really. To me, he was an idiot. I mean, I'm sorry, but he tells me that, and when it comes time to go to bed, and like I said, Jimmy's bedroom's back over there, empty bedroom here, bathroom, Harriet's bedroom, Tim's bedroom. There was an extra room, or we could have had two of the kids, boys, together. But he said, no, he said, he went in and slept in the same bed with me that night. The next morning, we were standing out there, and he was starting to gather his stuff up. And, well, and in the middle of the night, or not quite the middle, but I was, of course, very upset and hurt, and we were in bed, and I was trying not to cry, but I had gotten really upset and was crying, and so I got up, and I remember real clear going in across the hall into the bathroom, shutting the door and sitting on the floor and crying. And I had asked him if he would, while we were in bed, I said, would you just hold me for just a little bit? He said no. And of course didn't. And then the next morning, he started getting things together. And Jimmy came. And unbeknownst to me, he had asked him to come and help him get all his stuff. And Jim did. And see him getting all of his clothes out of the closet and help him carry it out. And so we were up there in that landing, and I said, what am I supposed to do about my trip to Texas? He said, you've got the ticket, go. I said, okay, so I did. And while I was out there, I had a 2-week vacation. And while I was out there with Mom and Marty, Katrina called me. And she said, Mom, I'm not supposed to tell you this, but you don't have a job when you get back. Dad already hired somebody, and you're to teach them how to do the office work. And stupid me, I did it. And then, of course, I was told, he told me I was not to ever set foot in that building again. And so I didn't I did go out and train that young lady And then that was it. And I didn't go back out there for years and years. And then when he decided he was leaving and put Jim in charge, then I could go back out there because he wasn't there anymore.